everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead, and welcome to episode 243, Just Look and Notice with a Comment. I want to share a strategy that I have been using when I've been away from my writing for a while. I'm just starting the fall semester if you're listening to this in 2025, and I know I personally have not looked at a manuscript in at least 3 weeks. And I'm starting to not remember what is in there or what was the last thing that I worked on. I did write myself some notes, but I realized when I went back to the notes that they didn't make a whole lot of sense. And so one of the ways that I try to think about entering into writing in a very low pressure kind of way is to just look. And all I mean by that is I get my draft out and I just look around. I'm not committing to typing a single word. I'm going to, and I'll show you why in a second, but I'm not committing to anything other than reading my draft or just not even reading it, just looking at it. So by that, I mean, if I look at different sections, for example, I can see right away that I only have one paragraph in my literature review, or I have a half-finished chart in my results section. Or if I'm working on a book project, I can see that there's lots of content dumped into a spot where it doesn't belong, or I have an unfinished citation. So what I'm doing is I'm just allowing my brain to kind of take it all in and see what is there. For many people, especially students working on a dissertation, or if you're working on a book and you're right in the thick of, whatever it is that you're working on, this can sometimes be a little bit terrifying, but you're just looking, you're just noticing. And then usually after a little bit of looking, my fingers get kind of itchy to want to do something about it. For example, like if you see, let's pick something easy, like a word spelled wrong or a comma in the wrong place. Many of us will be very inclined to just want to fix it right there. Go ahead if you want to. But what I like to do, and I'm going to show this on the screen for those of you watching on YouTube, is I like to use the comment function. And I'm writing myself little notes, but they're very targeted. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. So for example, I am working on a book on sabbaticals. I've mentioned it many times on the podcast, and I'm about in the section that I'm working on in a particular chapter, I am showing a figure that offers some questions to think through a sabbatical design. And as I was reading along and kind of noticing, I see some things I need to fix. So I put some different comments in, just different things, different ways that I might address some issues. But when I got to this spot, I wrote myself a little comment that just says, should I introduce a framework for sustainable sabbaticals so this figure 1 makes more sense? So what I'm noticing just by doing some looking around is that, hey, I've got this really big thing that I'm introducing later in the chapter, but it would work. My figure 1, which is a series of questions, would work a lot better if the framework came before that. So yes, it's a note, make sure you move this, but it's also asking myself a question if I want to do that. And so one of the great things about sometimes leaving yourself some questions is that, of course, you can answer them, and that gives you an activity to do. But in this case, one of the things I know that this will trigger me to do is to look at that framework and decide how much of that information is needed for somebody to understand figure 1. It could be that it's the other way around. Figure 1 needs to come first before my framework. And that's one of the great things about not feeling the pressure to produce words per se that actually can contribute to moving the project forward, but leaving yourself some notes that are generative in some way, that are designed to have you really think through some of the bigger parts of the project. Many times this can be much less stressful and much less daunting when you haven't been in your writing for a while. So I know for one of my goals for this week for my writing time is that I'm only going to spend an hour writing. That's it for the first week back in classes. 1 hour is kind of all I can do, but also all I'm going to do, all I want to do, 1 hour. And all I'm doing is just doing kind of a quick read around in one of my chapters and just looking and then noticing and making a comment. If making comments is a little too overwhelming, even just looking lays down that track in your brain again about your project. And when you come back to it, it will be easier the next time. So I'm hoping this strategy is a very kind of a simple way to ease into writing. I found it effective, and then I also delete the comments as I take care of them in the project. So sometimes they stay in there for a while. Sometimes they're only there till the very next writing session. I hope this strategy is helpful and happy writing this week.